that becomes so when we are talking about NPS, product quality becomes an extremely important variable. We're talking about packaging quality. We are talking about delivery speeds. We are talking about return and refund, right? We are talking about from a platform discovery perspective, the assortments and the recommendations that are given to the product, to the customer, right? So I think there are many such variables that you will identify. Now, product quality can be a main cause, but under product quality also there can be a multiple level of causes, right? As to what are these? What I am primarily trying to tell all of you is that a problem will have multiple dimensions, multiple variables, which will cause a problem. And it's important to identify these variables in the beginning, right? To identify and solve a problem, it's important that you identify what variables are these, right? Then once you have the variable, right, it's important to form a hypothesis. Hypothesis is what? A point of view, right? You just form a point of view. Yeah, I think that if I send a 3-star product to a customer, the NPS is bad. Vis-a-vis if I send a 4.5-star customer to the 4.5-star product to a customer, the NPS is good. You know, I have a promoter rather than a detractor. So this is a hypothesis. There's nothing but a hypothesis, right? You feel something, convert it into a mathematical problem, right? You have a logical problem, convert it into a mathematical problem and say, my hypothesis is my null hypothesis is that there is no impact if I send in a 3-star product versus a 4.5-star product. My alternate hypothesis is that yes, there is an impact if I send the 4.5-star product versus a 3-star product, right? That becomes a hypothesis. And now what you will do is primarily collect data to start validating these hypotheses, right? So basis the variables, you form hypothesis, and from those hypotheses, then you start collecting data to validate those hypotheses, right? I mean, Shubhashish, keep moving to the next slide. Yeah, so the next important thing is collect the data, right? Once you there are multiple ways to collect data. Sometimes you have that data already. When I'm talking about a 3-star product versus a 5-star product, we already have that data. We ship a lot of 3-star versus 4.5-star products. And we can always check with that data whether my hypothesis is true or false, right? Whether it has a correlation with the problem statement that we are trying to identify, right? So identifying the problem is also about identifying the variables that are important for that problem, right? So you collect the data, you establish correlations, you see some things are actually impacting, some things are not impacting. Some hypotheses are true, some hypotheses are untrue. Basis that you will get something which is, if we move to the next slide, there was a question again. So now so far what we did is basically we said, yeah, we will define our problem, understand, hear from the customer, right? We will then go ahead and we will first hear from the customer. We will then go ahead and look at the process, identify the gaps and the variables, perform, draw some hypothesis, do some data collection, and I don't think anyone has responded so far. So collect data and you kind of validate and understand what are the variables that are there. Now, during this process, what is the key pitfall in identifying a problem, right? We were doing problem identification so far. What do you think is the key pitfall in identifying the problem? When you are doing this process, what can make the whole thing go wrong? Bhavya, no chats, responses on the questions, please. Yeah. I think See, it's the straightforward answer is assumption, right? You can't assume. And if you are assuming, please form a hypothesis, test it, collect data and test it, right? Assumption is what? Is also an hypothesis in a way. Yeah, I think I know that this is something that is causing the problem, right? So if you know that this is something that is causing the problem, please form the hypothesis, test it. And if you test it and you find the correlations, go ahead and log it in as one of the variables that you need to solve for, right? So I think the biggest pitfall is assumption. And the biggest pitfall is also to start looking for root causes, right? I mean, actually, all of these are pitfalls, but we're talking about the biggest pitfall, the key pitfall. The key pitfall is assumption. Sometimes we are over logical, right? I mean, we know what is wrong. We are so logical in our approach that we know what's going wrong. That also falls under the bucket of assumption. So please do not assume. Whenever you have a problem, the most important thing in identifying the problem is that you test every variable that you think is causing the problem. Test the variable, understand what the problem is, understand what are the probable reasons, and then start moving to the solutions. Because if you do it before that, I would say 6 to 7 out of 10 times you will end up solving for something that will not create the kind of impact you wanted to see. Right? So, yeah, I mean, this is a trick question, guys. Typically, how many factors impact a problem? What do you think? Yeah, is done. Is the responses registered?
Yeah, it's like we are trending at 78% responses. Now we can publish. We have got 71%.
Yeah. So I just told about assumptions, guys. I think the best answer here is I don't know. I just don't know. I also don't know. When I'm solving a problem, I never know how many factors are impacting a problem. I was speaking about NPS, and I know in NPS at least there are 4 to 5 factors. Again, basis the hypothesis and the validation of hypothesis. There are 4 to 5 critical factors that impact the NPS. But generally, a problem is not that simple, right? You will have multiple variables. You will have multiple variables that impact a problem, and you will never know how many variables are there until you actually draw it out, check each one of them, look at the hypothesis, and then start analyzing the impact of each variable. Right? Now that you know that I have, so what is the difference between, and this is something that I'm going to spend some time on, and it's an important aspect. Many a times people confuse analysis of impact with identification of variables, right? I spoke in the previous section about how do you identify variables, understand the correlation of those variables with the problem. When I'm saying you are understanding the correlation of variables with the problem, you're basically trying to understand whether this variable impacts the higher level problem that I have, right? Like if I say packaging, or let me be a little more specific. If I say delivery days of anything greater than 5 days impact NPS, it's one of the variables. Now, what I primarily end up doing is I will go ahead and check for the correlation of anything that is greater than 5 days. I would probably perform a proportion test or something. I mean, you all know, I mean, just go look at the Google and you will find what kind of statistical tests to perform. But you basically will collect data and perform some tests to see if this variable impacts NPS or not. Suppose we realize, yes, it does impact NPS. The next question is, by how much does it impact NPS, right? And that's where the impact of each variable come into picture, right? So if NPS is the Y, and number of days it takes to deliver is one of the x's, then basically there are ways and means in which you can understand, either through regression, through A/B testing, through different techniques, right? I mean, A/B testing is something that's very close to all of our hearts. We do it in everything that we do. We can understand exactly how much is the impact of that variable on the problem, right? And this is a very, very important process, because just before this, the question that I asked as to how many variables impact a problem, there can be many variables that can impact a problem, right? You always will have to prioritize. You always will have to understand what impacts by how much, and then what is it that will have a low impact to high impact scale pay to the user, and then from the feasibility of implementation, solutioning, effort, from a low high impact, you kind of try to draw it out and see what impacts the user the most, and what is it that are quick wins, what are is that is home runs. I mean, home runs are some things that's very high on feasibility of implementation as well, which means it's easier to solve, and impact to the user is also high. There are multiple graphs you would see for this, but ultimately it's all about, I mean, the best tool to prioritize is a Pareto. I have not drawn it here, but many of us have always looked at a Pareto, and that's my favorite word. Whenever I am trying to talk to my team, I always say एक Pareto बना के देख लेते हैं कौन सी key problems, right? So it's important to basically have those very, very clearly and outlined and prioritize things. The next question is a very important question. The next question is a question which asks you that, do you think a prayer can help you identify the vital fews? The answer to this is very simple, yes or no.
So we have got 65% of inputs, 70. I'm ending the poll and publishing the result.
Let's move to the next slide.
Sure.
There's something called as a serenity prayer. How many of you know about that? It can actually help you solve a problem. Understand what are the vital fews that I need to work upon. The serenity prayer actually tells you that God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. You know what it means? It means some things that are out of my control, right? Courage to change the things I can, which basically means these are the things that are in your control. And obviously the wisdom to identify the difference, right? So it helps. Sometimes prayers do set the course of actions, right? So there is a very important grid that we should remember. We just move to the next one and next slide. I think, yeah, I mean, while you have identified the high impact, the medium impact and low impact initiatives, is also very, very important. And this is one mistake or pitfall again say that people make, is to understand what is it that is in control and what is it that is out of control, right? Generally, we run behind things that we honestly do not control the output for. Here, I'll tend to become a little more philosophical. This is where we try to change our vibes, right? That's out of control. What is in control is our behavior, right? So let's ensure that our behavior towards them is right? So I think it's a very, very important thing to remember, that when you're solving a problem and finally identifying the things that you're going to solve and implement, right? You should know what is it that is out of control and what is in control, right? And the other, graph I've already explained in the previous slide. So these are some grids that you should remember. Always before you start implementing solutions, please take it through this grid and be very, very clear on what are the things that you would be able to, right? Great.
So, yeah. If you allow me, maybe you can kind of be a bit more comprehensive by citing an example of this grid from our day-to-day work space.
Great example. I have a great example. It's an example that I can always quote. When we were solving for RTO in the very first year of our existence, from the time I started, but that's what I mean. We started solving for courier problems. I mean, you would have heard me continuously say in town halls, we're trying to change the process of our couriers. We're trying to control fakes. We're trying to do that. We're trying to do this. We're trying to build a strategy around vendor management, and a lot of things I used to talk about in the first year. And honestly, that was the thing that was falling in the out of control zone, because that was not the thing that we were doing or it was in our control. It was something that someone else was supposed to do, and we were just telling them to do it, but they still were, whether they do it or not was their choice, right? I used to go to the courier partners, to vendors, meet their CEOs, COs, operations guys, everyone, right, from ground till the top, and tell them, yeah, you know what, why don't you start attempting shipments like this? Why don't you do this? It will help getting better deliveries. And they used to say, I'm kar denge, bilkul kar denge, right? But we didn't see whether we were actually seeing the graph go in the opposite direction, right? So a great example of how we were working on something that was out of our control, did not lead to any result, and then we actually started working on platform related issues, right, on our internal processes or on our internal methods of doing things, right? And the moment we moved to that in control zone, RTOs started to show a decline. And I mean, today we are where we are, and we will be in a better position tomorrow. The whole reason for that was that we started working on parameters that were in control. Sometimes what is out of control can have a very high impact. So by the way, fakes always have like a 25% contribution to the RTO, right? But then it's there even today, right? It is the single biggest problem that we have today. But we got so fascinated by solving it, because it was a high impact problem, that we forgot that it is not something that we control. It's something that's external, right? And we forgot that there is another 75% that we can solve for, right? And that 75% was in our control. Right? So I think it's a great example. It's a live example. I am sure all of you will be able to relate to this. I mean, you have been a part of this journey of RTO reduction. You've seen how the company has been struggling with that problem. Today, we have probably come at par, and very soon, I think this will, from an area of weakness, this will become an area of strength, right? But it's a great example and a self-reflection. I can tell you that how, if you start working on things that are out of control, you waste a lot of time, you waste a lot of energy, and you hardly see any outcomes, right? So Subhashish, that answers your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for asking that question. So people, feel free to put in your questions in the chat box. I'm monitoring the chat box, so if there is any question that I need to answer, I'll answer that. So yeah, now basically we have seen how to identify a problem, and we know the steps of identifying the problem, identifying the variables, testing it out, identifying the impact. After identifying the impact, doing prioritization. Now basically we are solving it, right? Now we have to solve what. By the way, I'm not going to give you a gyan about how to solve a problem. I think all of us, as I said in the beginning of my session, all of us are problem solvers. The biggest problem is in identifying what the right problem is, and being able to prioritize it well. But even after doing all this, there is another problem that we face, and which is about solutioning. We miss some fundamentals. So what do you think is the most important step in implementing a solution? So while you have done a solutioning, what do you think is the most important step while you are implementing and before you're implementing a solution? So Subhashish, give people time. Let the poll results reach 90% and then publish the results. responses. How much response do we have right now?
So till now we have received 58% response here on this question.
Guys, you need to respond. You're not here for attendance. Anyone who's here for attendance can feel free to drop out.
So out of 63 participants, we have received 45 responses. We are somewhere around 80% those who have already casted.
Great. ठीक है, चलिए publish the results. Let's see.
Here we go.
Yeah. Actually, all of them are important, but the most important is what I'm going to talk about next, right? And it's just a very simple slide. So let's move. Most important piece is verification and validation. I think it's a very, very important step, right? You generally have a problem, and that problem arises from the need and expectation of a customer, right? I mean, that's generally how business problems are, right? And then to solve that problem, you did your identification of the problem statement, you did investigation to identify variables, you actually went ahead and also did analysis to identify the impact of those variables, you prioritize those variables, and then you solve those variables. But while you're solving those variables, basically what you're coming up with is generally a list of things that you need to do to solve the problem, right? To implement the solution. Now, the list of things are generally nothing but specifications. In technical terms, those are called specifications, right? You will come up with a specification saying that, you know what, anything that is greater than 5 days of O2D, because O2D of 5 days is an important variable. Anything which is greater than 5 days of O2D, I'm going to put it on fast track and ensure that any order that is taking more than 5 days for fulfillment will be fulfilled within 5 days. When I say fast track, there can be different ways. There can be ways of doing express trucking. There can be ways of actually flying the item from one corner to the other corner in the country, or I will forward place those items for warehousing and things like that. But basically, what I'm trying to say, the specification there is that any order that is in actual taking greater than 5 days for fulfillment, I'm going to fast track that and convert it into a less than 5 days, right? So I have a list of specifications saying that I need to do this to ensure that an order is always less than 5 days from an O2D perspective. Now, when I have written that specification, I will also form a process to make it happen. Process and product would be the outcome, right? One of the things that we generally don't do is we never create a feedback loop to verify whether the specifications that we had. So see, user expectations are a very high level requirement, right? But when we are talking about a specification, it's a very specific problem statement, a very specific specification that you are trying to meet. So the product or the process that you have designed to meet the specifications, you need to verify whether it is actually meeting the specifications or not, right? And this is a part of testing, experimentation. Again, something that is our strength. We do it very, very well, right? Is basically we roll it out on like a 5% user set, check whether what we have designed, what we expected, what the specifications we have done, are we verifying that? Are we verifying whether that is being done or not, right? And verification is basically seeing whether what we did is solving the problem, right? And validation is basically when we see whether it works at scale, right? And it's primarily where the user is getting impacted. When we scale up our systems, our processes, are they continuing to behave the same way they were supposed to behave, right? Great example, I'll tell you. Again, coming from RTO, this is something that all of us can relate to. When we, in the first wave of our RTO reduction, we basically saw that there were bad orders that were there in our systems, right? We were having like almost 12 to 13% orders that were there in our system. We did a small verification and we found that if we remove these cohort from our bucket, we saw like a 3 to 5% reduction in RTO, right? And hence, after doing verification, we went ahead and rolled it out to 100%. Now, the verification was done on a 5% set, and then we rolled it out on 100%. And what we realized is when we rolled it out on 100%, we started losing 12 to 13% orders, and there was zero reduction in RTO. Right? So where did we fail? We fail in validating our solution. We failed in actually figuring out whether our solution will work at scale or not. Right? It might have been that just the way we were setting up the entire solution or the product or the experiment or the setup, that was not done right. But if we would have taken small steps to validate, to actually see that from 5 to 10% it's working, from 10 to 20 it's working, from 20 to 40 it's working, 40 to 80 it's working, then we would have known that if there is any mistake, we could have corrected on the way. But we didn't do that. We just went ahead and rolled it out to 100%, right? And then we realized that we are not seeing any goodness. So validation is also a very, very important step, right? To check your solution, whether it works at scale or not. Fair? So it's an important thing. I see in case the problem is, so Vidhi asks, in case a problem is required to be swiftly resolved, don't you think verification and validation can take more than expected time? Yes, it will take more than expected time. My experience of 16 years tells me that any problem that has been resolved swiftly has always reoccurred. Think deeply about it. It's a very, very important thing. Whenever we have been able to resolve things swiftly, I have not seen sustained results, because generally we either miss out on verification, as you said, validation, validating whether what we have designed for is working, is the solution good enough to work at scale, will it take care of all the edge cases? We have not done all of that, and we went ahead and implemented a solution, right? And when we implement a solution, basically what will happen is while it may work at then and there, as I said, during the verification cycle, you will see in 5% it's working. But then when we do it at scale, it starts to fail. Why? Because we did not check the edge cases. We did not verify or validate enough to actually see whether it will work on all the cohorts or not. So there are multiple things that we can kind of tend to miss. So I always believe that if it takes 5 extra days to solve a problem, let's invest that time. My team will know that, and that's where I think persistence and focus comes into picture. I generally don't let people move forward until they have actually got the solution right. I don't. And even if it takes time, it takes time. I am very, very particular about the fact that you need to verify and validate. It may take a little more time, but trust me, the results and the benefits that you will see from following these steps are going to be much more sustainable in the long term, rather than just looking at things from a short-term perspective. Right? I think to this, probably I'm seeing Girish. So Girish can add the importance of verification and validation. Girish, RTO has been a favorite topic for all of us. And I think you have done the most rigorous verification and validation for anything before it got rolled out this time, right? So I do feel that there is a lot of merit in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think also just to add to, I think, Sarwarth, what you've mentioned, context in which we operate also tends to change. So while verification is validation is both important, I think keep on re-verifying your results because the context tend to change, and in that scenario you don't want to be in a situation where you verified and then some time back, and then when you scaled it up, your validation fails because you're not seeing the results. That's perhaps because you didn't keep yourself honest to keep re-looking at the data points, because the scenarios change, context changes. So I think both these steps are very, very important. And yes, like Sarwarth mentioned, I mean, we see this day in, day out, and it sometimes can add to some bit of frustration, but I think that's just part and parcel of the process for a long-term sustained impact. So yeah, I mean, I think Vidhi, you asked that question that jaldi karna hai to man to karta hai karne ka, but I mean, I think slow and steady is the right approach, because you don't want to be in a situation where kuch kar diya aur result bhi nahi mila, right? So it is better to be slow.
Thanks, Girish. And by the way, people, what Girish just said leads us to the next slide. And trust me, it was not planted. I didn't ask him. I did not prepare him for this question. It was extempore. But why do you think solutions don't last? Right? I think that's in a way Girish has already answered this question. But I think you should take a stab at why you think solutions don't last, right? Was it because the problem was not defined clearly? There was an error in identifying the variables. The impact was not assessed properly, or due to lack of monitoring.
So we have reached 54%.
Okay, folks, please answer.
43 people out of 62 have responded.
A little more push, please. Go ahead and start answering. Okay.
All right, we have reached 83%. So I'm ending the poll. Going to publish the results. Here we go.
Great. So 42% people say, and let's stay on this for a little while, right? 42% people say due to lack of monitoring. Great point. 27% people say the impact was not assessed properly. So for them, the point that I think what we did or what we covered so far, an important aspect of that journey was the impact assessment, right? So if we have not assessed the impact properly, we should not even move forward, right? We should not come to the solution stage. If we are coming to solution stage without assessing the impact properly, that's not right, right? I mean, we are not following the process. The problem was not defined clearly. Again, identifying the problem is the biggest work that is required, and we spent a lot of time process, right? That we did in terms of not making the mistake of not knowing what the problem is, right? Error in identifying variables is again, we wanted to do some correlations. We were supposed to do some regressions, simple A/B tests, yeah, to understand if there is variables that are impacting the problem statement or not. So I think Raghu, it's a very fair point. By the way, all of these questions are designed in such a way where it kind of sounds fair, and they are fair, by the way. All of these points are fair. They all are relevant. But I think the biggest point where solutions don't last is the change of context. I think what Girish said, right? Is basically the environment around us is changing rapidly. And hence, if we don't have the right monitoring systems, the right control loops for us to give us the feedback, we will not know if our solutions are relevant anymore or not, right? So it's extremely important. I mean, by the way, the solutions will not last if the other three are also not right. But I'm assuming that because we have reached here at this phase of the problem solving, we have got our problems identified very clearly. We have identified the variables very clearly. We have identified the impact of those variables very clearly. And now we have implemented a solution as well, right? Where we have verified and validated whether the solution works or not. But now the question is that after implementation, does it last? And after implementations, generally solutions don't last when we don't have the right control plans. And that kind of takes us to the last slide, which is basically having the right set of control plans, monitoring dashboards. You know, I have put some charts there, which are range charts or H-bar-R charts and things like that. There are multiple ways. Move to the next slide, Suresh. Yeah. So I think there are multiple ways in which you can monitor these, but it's important to have a monitoring mechanism. Because if you don't have the right monitoring mechanism, if you don't have the right control plans is a technical term, but if you don't have the right monitoring mechanism, you don't have dashboards, you're not monitoring each of these variables with the changing environment, whether they are behaving right or wrong, we will have these problems of, things slipping back, right? We will have these problems where what we solved for today in the context of today may become irrelevant 1 year down the line, or probably 6 months down the line. Things are changing at a very, very rapid pace, right? So yeah, it is an important part, to actually have control plans. Whenever you're solving a problem, the art of problem solving does not finish at implementation of solution. It finishes when you have the right feedback loop also kind of built, so that you know whether your solution continues to work or it's deteriorating or it's improving over a period of time, right? And I primarily feel this is the last step. If you have put the right control plans, you've put the right feedback loops, you would always see that, if something is going wrong, you will know that before anyone else gets to know about it. Right? So yeah, moving to the summary. The maximum and the bulk of work is required to identify the problem, right? Which is basically can be through voice of customer, talk. Customer can be anyone, by the way. Okay, I did not mention this. Customer can be anyone, right? You can have internal customers, you can have external customers, you can have internal stakeholders that are your customers. Talk to them. I mean, just understand why they are worried about this, right? And what is bothering them. You will try and understand some of the problem statements that they may have. Then the most important thing is understand the process that is there in place. Many a times you won't even find a process, but sometimes you will have a process. Many a times you will have a very, very strong process which is there, but still there are defects coming out of that process. You need to understand the process in detail in terms of how the process is designed, how the information is flowing in the process, how the materials are flowing in the process, and hence is there complete transparency in terms of how things are happening, right? And that will help you identify some variables, some gap, saying that this is what is probably not happening right. These are the hypotheses that I have, which are basically causing the problem. You collect the data. Don't once you form the hypothesis, always form the hypothesis. Please never ever go on your gut. No, never ever go on your intuition. Form your hypothesis, collect the data for that, establish the correlation, right? Is the variable impacting the problem, right? And once you have identified that it impacts the problem, then also analyze how much impact does it have, right? Analyze the impact of each variable, right? Then pray to God, and also form your grids and see what is it that is low impact, high impact, or medium impact, both from a feasibility of implementation and from a customer impact perspective, right? And the most important thing, as I said, is understanding what is in control and what is not in control, right? And last box, which is the most important piece, which is where generally things fail, by the way. In my experience, I have seen things failing mostly here, right? I mean, is basically verifying and validating the solution, right? And then after implementing the solution, putting the control plans to actually see whether the problem and the solution that you have implemented is that giving you the right results, right? Having the right feedback loop is extremely, extremely important. And by the way, you can relate this to anything. You can relate it to a employee-manager relationship. You can relate it to a RTO problem. You can relate it to a business problem. In every aspect, this will work. And that's why I call it art and not maths, because it is applicable in every aspect of what we do. If I, as a manager, am not giving a feedback to my employees, I think that comes out as one of the key areas of concern in our Pulse survey this time, right? So please listen to your employees, understand what pains them, identify what will motivate them, right? Draw your hypothesis, test it, try those things. And once you have tested it with the employees also, give them the correct feedback, whether it's working or not working, because that will again help you build a relationship that will be more lasting, right? So yeah, I mean, any questions right now? We are open for questions. So anyone has any questions, please feel free to type it in the chat box. So
can we solve the problem of procrastination?
Can we solve the problem of procrastination?
Yeah.
The big
Because
hypothesis.
partially it lies on our control, partially it doesn't actually falls into our control.
So I think I can also solve the problem of a broken heart. But the point is, where do I stop, right? And that's where the in control and out of control things come into picture. But to your question, the problem of procrastination should have some impact. It should lead to some things not working well, right? And hence we should collect data, form the hypothesis, collect data, and see whether it is actually impacting the outcome. If it's impacting the outcome and you're able to analyze that impact, you will be able to prioritize. Trust me. The moment you know that because of me procrastinating something, there is a loss of 100 rupees every day that I do, which leads to 3,000 rupees a month, I'm sure you will prioritize it, right? There is no way you will still procrastinate to prioritize. At least what it would have done is at least when you're solving the problem with your team will tell you, boss, you are leading to a 3,000 rupees wastage every month. Why don't you solve? Why don't you prioritize? Right?
True.
So problems, as long as they're theoretical, honestly, will be very difficult to resolve. But the art is converting that theoretical problem into a mathematical problem. Identifying correlations, identifying what exactly is causing that problem, and then again implementing it in a real world, right? And implementation in the real world is about validating your problem and having the right feedback. It can be solved. Anything can be solved. I am not very quick that I can say that other than broken hearts I can join everything. I can actually mend that as well.
True. I mean, as we hear these days, is data is the new oil. So I'm sure that that itself quantifies the statement that how important this step is to collect the data and then recalibrate everything back to it in terms of solving the problem. True. Thank you, Sarwar. Anybody else have any questions? May feel free to please ask.
Can there be an ideal I'm reading what Girish has written on top of it first. Thanks, Girish. I will definitely probably I can again partner with some of you guys to actually write something like this. So Vinayak asks, can there be an ideal solution for a problem? I don't know. I just taught you that I can't assume, so I will not assume. There is nothing called ideal, Girish. Sorry, Vinayak. There is nothing called ideal. I think it's just the situation and the context that drives the solution to a problem. Sometimes the situation and context tells you to do something. At other times, the situation and context can ask you to do something totally opposite of what you did earlier, right? So honestly, there is no ideal solution for a problem. There are just contextual solutions to the problem, right? And context means data, right? So the context in which you are solving a problem basically is the right way to solve a problem. So if you ask me, can there be an ideal solution for a problem? The answer to that is I don't know, as it was, right? yeah, I mean, that's what it is. ठीक है जी. Thanks Raghu, and a small story for everyone. I want everyone to listen to the story. I have though forwarded the story to some of the people, but please have a look, listen to this story, and I want to leave you guys with this thought. Sound is not coming. Okay, its sound is not playing, so I am going to narrate the story. Unfortunately, you have to bear with my narration of story. So Harsh, I'll come to your question. If you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right. But remember that verifying and validating your solution is also extremely critical, right? I think that's the key takeaway, and putting the right controls also is important. So this story is about a village. Subhashish, have you fixed the problem, or
Let me give it a try once again, if it works.
No. Okay. So no problems. So this story is about a small village in which there were a lot of young kids, and there was this old man who used to be there in this village, who used to be treated as a wise old man, right? He is a very wise man, and he is someone who everyone looks up to. And these kids were generally very, because this man, you always used to tell him to do things which they believed were not the right ways of doing things, right? This man is always telling them, giving them ज्ञान. Like यार इसको ट्रैप करते हैं यार, ये तो बंदा जो है ना, ये रोज कुछ ना कुछ ज्ञान देता रहता है, चलो इसको एक आज हम ट्रैप करते हैं. So what they do is they kind of have a small trick up their sleeve. They take a very small bird in their hand, and then they hold it in the center of their hand, and they say, यार अब हम इसको जाके पूछेंगे कि बताओ मुझे, ये bird is alive or is it dead, right? So they say, okay, what if he says it's alive? Then they say, we will press it hard and open our fist and the bird will die. So he'll be wrong. Good idea, badhiya idea. What if he says it's dead? Then anyways we are holding it loosely. We're going to open our fist and we'll show that it is alive. या ये तो बहुत ही बढ़िया आइडिया है, आज तो फंसा, बुड्ढा फंसा, है ना? तो गए ये लोग बुड्ढे के पास. They went to the old man, the wise man, and they said कि sir, tell me, we have a small bird in our hand. Tell me whether it's dead or alive. I could have actually put this up as the poll question as well. I didn't know that I will have to narrate it. So the old man says, it's in your hands. Right? So I'll leave you with that thought. There are multiple ways you can understand this, but I hope you get the right message. So it's in your hands, right? Just remember that. And yeah, that's the end of the session. And please, I think Subhashish has one more trick up his sleeve.
Is it the poll that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think there was something like you wanted people to give a one-word feedback. Right?
Oh yeah. So yeah. So what we are doing here is that we have a question here. It's like one word for the session today, and just a second. I will share my screen, and there would be a QR code. So you can scan it from any of the scanner that is available with you all. You can
just
also
use your mobile device to scan this code, and in one word, describe in one word, how do you feel? Just one word. That's all you need. There are the constraints.
So once you have scanned this QR code, please confirm on the chat box so that I can shift the gears, because we are kind of populating this in some other site, because we had a little challenge in getting this done as a word cloud in Zoom. So we are still figuring out that if we can do that in the future sessions, but yes, we have found a solution to it. So we have it in some other website. So once you all have scanned it, please confirm so that I can shift the lever and open the other site. All right, I'm closing this presentation. I hope that you all have already scanned it.
So, Subhashish, are you going to show the word cloud?
Yeah, it is coming up, so I will just share it. Just a moment. Here we go.
Yeah, this was the fun part, right? I mean, where it keeps changing as people keep putting their answers. So great, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you had a insightful, enlightened, awesome, great session. And yeah, I mean, all the best. Remember, it's in your hands.
Thank you, Sarwat. I think it was a great session, and that too, I would say that we were lucky enough to, kind of have this topic as one of the topic sessions for Curiosity Club, because we have also identified this as one of the area that we need to work upon in terms of upscaling. So I'm sure that I kind of shared with all those and also recommended all the people managers to attend this. If not, just to share with you all that you can spread the word that we have also recorded this session, and in the times to come, whatever training that we would be doing, we will try and record them, and we are kind of creating a repository of all the programs that we are doing under SD Learning Studio, and it's readily available for all of you to come back and kind of, you want to reiterate your learning or reinforce your understanding about the topic. So this is one thing that I thought that I should share with you all. We will be taking a little time in terms of formalizing the thing, but yeah, we are good to go ahead and ready to share the link so that the data is readily available with you. But in terms of look and feel and all those, we will take some time to kind of present it in a very professional manner. Thank you so much. I again invite people who want to share their thoughts about the interests or the passion that you all have. This platform is open for you all. Please feel free. I am there to reach out to you and help you out to come up with a session like this. So thank you so much for joining in. And once again, I would like to thank Sarwat for investing time into it. So thank you so much. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye.